a Formula 1 fan and a content creator is often a difficult mix. To do your hobby properly, you need some intrigue, some spice, something to stick your teeth into. Formula 1 often doesn't do that. Sometimes you gotta wait for the half a dozen rounds to go by for something special to happen. But when it does arrive, it's incredible. And that's what the Bahrain Grand Prix was. We were a little more on edge going into this one. Red Bull proved the Bahrain test wasn't a mirage. Verstappen led every session going into the race, including an emphatic pole position where he outqualified Lewis Hamilton by the better part of half a second. In the last 8 years of Mercedes dominance, the number of times they were this clearly on the back foot, I could probably count on one hand. Not that we knew it at the time, but Red Bull missing the chance to counter Hamilton's undercut on the first stint and maintain track position might have been the difference maker. It forced Red Bull into having Verstappen gun Hamilton down on the track to try and take the win after being more aggressive on tyres, using 2 medium stints to Hamilton's 2 stints on hards. But we won't end up talking about that. The talking point will be Max Verstappen's race-winning overtake with a handful of laps to go, until it wasn't. Verstappen was put in a position where he had to take 4 wheels off the track to complete the pass, and then had to give it straight back to avoid a penalty, and Max didn't get a clear-cut chance again to take the win before running out of laps. Within hours of the finish, mass disagreements hit the social media timelines about whether this should have happened at all. It didn't help when onboard footage showed Lewis Hamilton running wide at turn 4 29 times. By the time a team message by Red Bull told Max, "Oh, by the way, you could take the same line here too until the race director tells us otherwise," race director Michael Masi had effectively locked the gate and told Mercedes to stop long after the horse had already bolted. You see, this is an apples and oranges case, using one incident to try and validate the other, and the confusion is understandable. Having a track limit only being forced in certain sessions and with certain contexts is always going to irk people. Even more so if the parameters change in the middle of a race. If the drivers themselves were confused about it, and they're the ones in the car, I can understand why we as fans might be too. That old topic of inconsistent stewarding has reared its ugly head yet again. It's a darn shame because one of the better races in the history of the V6 hybrid era will be remembered just as much by its own misdirection than by the fact we just had the world's 2 best racing drivers from 2 different teams go head to head all the way to the best final lap decider since probably Austria 2016? And both teams are going to walk away from this weekend delighted. Mercedes took a 1-3 and the fastest lap bonus in a Grand Prix they had no real business winning and made a critical error on Bottas's stop. On the other side of the coin, Red Bull absolutely had the best car this weekend. I know it's very easy to jump the gun and be over-optimistic about this sport, but this was the best Red Bull has looked since 2013, easily. We'll be very spoilt if Hamilton and Verstappen end up making a season out of this. Further observations? Heck of a drive from Sergio Perez. For the second time in Bahrain, he came back from last on the opening lap to crack the top 6. If you had any Alex Albon stock left, it might finally be time to sell, because it's about as worthless as Dogecoin at this point. McLaren looks to be the best of the rest with another 4th place from Norris and 7th from Ricciardo on debut. Speaking of which, it was a heck of a debut too from Yuki Tsunoda, who kept it clean, passed some fast drivers and scored points on debut, the first Japanese driver ever to do so. Can't ask for much more, especially after his high-profile teammate chucked his great start away. Ferrari might have the second rear gunner it's always needed with Sainz in range of Leclerc, and it's a shame his Spanish counterpart Fernando Alonso had to retire with brake issues when he too was running in the points in a pretty miserable first race for Alpine otherwise. Sebastian Vettel definitely owes Esteban Ocon a Christmas hamper. Gaining 5 penalty points in a day is an ugly debut for a team that had a lot of hype behind them. I'm going to be kind here and say, the man definitely needs more time in the car after a testing shitstorm. But whew, that was rough. This for me was a 9 out of 10 race. A future classic that I'd happily watch again, and only major shenanigans would have made it a 10. Wasn't the elbows out, bloody nose dogfight we've seen before around Bahrain, but it was a fascinating tactical battle that peaked with a brilliant crescendo and some fun fights in the midfield too. Let's hope this wasn't just a one-off.